We finally have the answer to what the abstracted really are in the amazing digital circus, and episode 8 gave us enough clues to understand their meaning. And most importantly, what could happen in episode 9. So get ready, because with all this, everything is starting to make a lot more sense. To be able to understand what the abstracted are, first we have to understand how they are created. The clearest example we have is Kofmo, the character who became abstracted in the pilot episode of the amazing digital circus. The other characters mentioned that Kofmo had started acting very strangely, and that he constantly talked about a door that said exit, just like the same door Pomni mentioned. But when the characters finally enter his room, we realize that his walls are completely covered with the word exit, and one of his decorative pictures even says that there is no way out. And over time, we understand something very important. When someone becomes abstracted, it's because they start to experience anxiety, fear, or extreme pressure. And it sounds very logical. In fact, that's what we all think abstraction is, but the reality is different. There's another explanation that makes much more sense as to why the characters become abstracted. But before I reveal this answer to you, we have to look at another key case, Jax. At first, he seems like a character with a very strong mind, as if nothing affects him inside the digital circus. But as the episodes go on, he gradually starts to change. His behavior starts to become more unstable, more disconnected, to the point where he begins to imagine things inside his own room. And finally, he reaches that hallucination where he almost becomes abstracted. But luckily, it doesn't happen. And this reveals something very important to us. Abstraction doesn't happen from one moment to the next. It's a process that takes a long time, and it can even be stopped. So, if abstraction were just anxiety, then everyone would have already become abstracted, don't you think? Anyway, let's go to the clue that episode 8 left us, the one that practically helps us solve this mystery of the abstracted. At a key moment, we can see Kane inside his office, and we hear him complaining about why the characters aren't happy with everything he's done for them. But then comes the most important phrase. Kane mentions that the avatars were created based on the neural data of each character.
He even made a program that gives them the ideal body based on their mental files. They hate him too!
I mean, he based it on their memories, personality, traumas, and even their own perception. And this tells us something very clear. The digital circus system represents each character depending on their mind. So the most logical thing is that the abstractions don't happen just because of emotional pressure, but because of something much deeper. A desynchronization between the mind and the habit. Let me explain it to you in a somewhat easier way. When a character starts to change the way they think, when their mind starts to break, the system can no longer interpret this data correctly. And as a result, it can't represent or render them within the circus in a stable way. That's why abstracted characters look like that. They don't have a defined shape and they don't have structure either. So no, they don't turn into monsters. What really happens is that the system can no longer represent them correctly. It's literally a corrupted file. A corrupted avatar. And this would explain something we saw before. When Kofmo, already abstracted, touches Ragata, she starts glitching and showing errors. And this happens because we're not just talking about a monster or another character who just took a different form, but about system instability, a corrupted file that can even start to affect the other files. And the best evidence that can help us support that theory is the character of Zooble. We know that Zooble's biggest trauma is how he perceives himself. So Kane, when trying to interpret this data in Zooble's avatar, represented Zooble in an abstract form. That's right, friends! This connects even more with the idea that abstracted characters are simply the result of a desynchronization between the mind and the avatar. If Zooble had this problem even before arriving at the digital circus, Kane represented her in this abstract way. So with this, we can already see the connection with the form abstracted characters take. But then, if it's just a desynchronization, can an abstracted character be fixed? Can it be saved or resynchronized? Possibly yes, friends, and the biggest proof we have is in one of Kinger's memories. Well, possibly Kinger is the only one who understands how this part or this glitch inside the digital circus works. Well, when Queenie became abstracted, we saw how he tried to make her come to her senses. And the most interesting thing is that Queenie, when abstracted, didn't react in the same aggressive way as when Kaufmo was abstracted. We could see that, in a way, Kinger was making Queenie come to her senses or regain her sanity. So maybe, if only Kinger had had more time to recalibrate Queenie's thoughts or mind, her avatar could have returned to normal. That way, the circus would have had time to interpret that neural data efficiently. But this was when Kane arrived and simply sent Queenie to the basement. He didn't let Kinger heal her. Let's remember that Kane can't understand human emotions. So, maybe for him, the abstracted are simply an error in the system, which must be eliminated or kept somewhere so they don't affect the functioning of the whole circus. And now that we see the end of episode 8 when Kane was eliminated, it gives us the impression that maybe that basement where Kane kept the abstracted will be left open. So the characters are going to encounter all the abstracted, and of course they're going to want to attack them just like Kaufmo tried to attack them. Possibly Kinger will be able to identify Queenie and finally have the chance to help her stabilize her mind. And with this, everyone will know the answer to be able to cure them. Little by little, the characters will help their friends remember who they really are. Jax will be able to help Rivet come back, and Rivet, when she is cured, will be able to help Kaufmo. In this way, they will all help each other so they can return to their normal forms and that way find a way out. But anyway, friends, what do you think about this theory regarding those who've been abstracted in the digital circus? Do you have any other explanation about how they work or what they really are? The definitive answer will be in episode 9, but for now, all we can do is wait. Don't forget to leave your opinions in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.